Here's something that will probably bother you for the rest of the day. The most dangerous thing in your refrigerator right now is probably sitting right next to the most protective thing in your refrigerator, and they look almost identical. I'm Dr. Ava Collins, and I've spent over 2 decades watching patients do everything right. They walk every morning, they take their supplements, they cut out sugar, they get their checkups. And yet their arteries are still stiffening, their bones are quietly thinning, their blood pressure keeps creeping up, and nobody, not their cardiologist, not their pharmacist, not their nutritionist, has ever pointed the finger at the thing they eat at least twice a week without a second thought: cheese. Now, before you roll your eyes, I'm not here to tell you to stop eating cheese. I'm a doctor, not a punishment. What I'm going to tell you is that there is a very specific set of cheeses that deliver something extraordinary for the aging body after 60, and a very specific set that are quietly contributing to the exact problems most of us are working hard to prevent. And here's the part that concerns me most. Many people have the problematic ones in their fridge right now, and have simply never been told why it matters. So stay with me, because what I'm going to share around the 7-minute mark completely changed how I counsel my own patients about dairy. It's the kind of thing that makes people feel they should have known this sooner. Let's start with what's actually working for you. Most people think of Gouda as just a mild, pleasant snack cheese. But if you're buying Gouda that's been aged at least 18 months, the kind with the hard, almost caramel-like interior, you're getting something with a genuinely useful nutritional profile for the aging body. Here's why. During that long aging process, something important happens to the protein structure of the cheese. It breaks down into smaller compounds called bioactive peptides, which are considerably easier for an aging digestive system to absorb. That means the proteins in many foods aren't being fully absorbed, even when we're eating well. That means the proteins in many foods aren't being fully absorbed, even when we're eating well. Long-aged cheeses, like Gouda, partially bypass that problem because the breakdown has already begun before the food ever reaches your stomach. But the real headline with aged Gouda is vitamin K2, a nutrient most people have genuinely never heard of, and one that I consider among the most underappreciated in senior health today. Here's what K2 does. It activates specific proteins involved in calcium regulation, proteins that help direct calcium toward the bones and teeth, and away from soft tissues like arterial walls. Now, I want to be precise here because this is often oversimplified. Calcium going to your bones also depends on adequate vitamin D, and the two really work together. K2 activates the proteins that guide calcium. Vitamin D supports the absorption of calcium in the first place. You need both, but most seniors aren't getting enough of either, and aged Gouda gives you a meaningful source of K2 that's genuinely difficult to find elsewhere in food. Research has found that populations with higher dietary K2 intake show significantly less arterial calcification, and aged Gouda is one of the richest food sources available. Now, I want to plant a thought before we move on. There's a cheese coming later on this list that appears sophisticated and heart-healthy. In fact, it's the kind of cheese that health-conscious people specifically choose as a better option, and what the research shows about its effects on seniors is worth knowing. Keep that in the back of your mind. I want to make a distinction immediately. I am not talking about the product in the green shaker can. That product, and I use the word loosely, is typically a mixture of cellulose filler, anti-caking agents, and a small amount of actual cheese. It has essentially no relationship to what I'm about to describe. Real, authentic Parmigiano-Reggiano from Italy, aged between 24 and 36 months, is one of the most nutritionally dense whole foods available. 1 ounce contains roughly 10 grams of complete, highly bioavailable protein, more calcium than a full glass of milk, and all 9 essential amino acids in proportions that make it a complete protein comparable to lean meat. But here's the part that matters most for aging. That long aging process breaks down protein so thoroughly that it is, in a very real sense, easier for your body to use. Even seniors experiencing the natural decline in stomach acid and digestive enzyme production that comes with age can absorb these proteins more efficiently than they would from many other sources. One note on lactose. Aged Parmigiano-Reggiano does still contain lactose, but in very small amounts because the fermentation process consumes most of it during aging. For most people with mild lactose sensitivity, this is generally well tolerated, though individual responses vary. And there's one more thing worth noting. Parmigiano-Reggiano contains tyrosine, an amino acid that serves as a building block for several important neurotransmitters, including dopamine and norepinephrine, which are involved in alertness, mood, and cognitive function. Tyrosine alone won't reverse cognitive decline, but as part of a well-rounded diet, it's a meaningful contribution. Eat it in small chunks after meals, which is the traditional Italian approach. As it turns out, tradition and science frequently point in the same direction. This one surprises people. Cheddar sounds ordinary, but grass-fed raw milk cheddar, aged a minimum of 60 days, is in a meaningfully different nutritional category from conventional pasteurized cheddar. The word raw here means unpasteurized, and I know that raises eyebrows. Here's the important context. When raw cheddar is properly aged for at least 60 days, the natural acidification process significantly reduces the risk associated with potentially harmful bacteria. What that aging process also preserves, which pasteurization at high temperatures would otherwise reduce, is a portion of the beneficial bacterial cultures, heat-sensitive enzymes, and certain fat-soluble nutrients that contribute to this cheese's nutritional value. I want to be straightforward. This doesn't mean raw cheese carries zero risk, particularly for individuals who are immunocompromised. But for generally healthy seniors, properly aged raw cheddar from a reputable source is considered safe, and the nutritional trade-off is worth understanding. Grass-fed raw cheddar contains higher concentrations of conjugated linoleic acid than conventional cheddar, along with a more favorable omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, both associated with anti-inflammatory effects that are particularly relevant for seniors managing joint discomfort, cardiovascular risk, or metabolic concerns. It also contains vitamin K2 in a form that research identifies as highly active for arterial and bone protection. And because the beneficial bacterial cultures remain partially intact, it supports gut microbiome diversity in ways that pasteurized cheese cannot. One practical note: avoid heating this cheese above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Higher temperatures will reduce the activity of those beneficial bacteria and enzymes, which are part of what makes it worth choosing in the first place. At the top of the list, Gruyère, real Gruyère from Switzerland, produced from raw alpine milk and aged a minimum of 12 months. I want to tell you why it earns the top spot, but I also want to hold back one specific reason until a little later, because it connects directly to something I'm going to reveal in the back half of this video that I think will genuinely surprise you. What I'll say now, the bacterial cultures used in Gruyère's aging process produce propionic acid, a compound associated with measurable reductions in systemic inflammation. These same bacteria also produce vitamin B12 in meaningful concentrations, which is particularly valuable for seniors. Because B12 absorption becomes more difficult after 65 due to declining production of intrinsic factor, a protein required for B12 uptake in the gut. Getting adequate protein as we age is one of the most important and most commonly underestimated strategies for preserving lean muscle mass. Gruyère delivers high-quality, well-absorbed protein alongside that B12 and its anti-inflammatory compounds in a combination that's difficult to replicate from other single food sources. More on Gruyère shortly, because one of its nutritional properties connects directly to the most important point in today's conversation. I want to stop here for just a moment. What I'm sharing with you today is the kind of nuance that simply doesn't fit into a standard appointment. Guidelines are broad by design. They're written for populations, not individuals. And the specific ways that aging changes how we absorb, use, and respond to food rarely make it into the conversation at a routine checkup. If you want to keep receiving this kind of evidence-informed, practical guidance designed specifically for your stage of life, please subscribe to the Eternal Vigor Way right now and hit the bell. Every week, I bring you the science that actually applies to the body you're living in today. The second half of this video is where things get genuinely important, because we're about to go through 4 cheeses that are far more common in senior diets than they should be. And the last one? The one most people assume is a smart, health-conscious choice? I want you to hear that one all the way through. Let me be direct. Those individually wrapped slices, the ones that peel off a plastic film and melt perfectly onto everything, are legally required to be labeled cheese product or pasteurized prepared cheese food because they contain less than 51% actual cheese by weight. The remainder is a carefully engineered mixture of emulsifying salts, industrial fats, preservatives, and artificial coloring. 2 slices can deliver over 600 milligrams of sodium, more than a quarter of the recommended daily maximum for adults over 60 with any blood pressure concern. But it's not just the volume of sodium that's concerning, it's the form. The sodium here comes primarily as disodium phosphate and sodium citrate, industrial emulsifying salts that research has specifically linked to accelerated arterial stiffness, impaired kidney phosphate clearance, and increased cardiovascular risk in older adults, particularly in those with existing kidney dysfunction or hypertension. There's also a gut health dimension. Certain emulsifiers used in processed cheese products have been studied in the context of gut microbiome health, with some research suggesting effects on the intestinal mucosal layer and beneficial bacterial populations. The downstream impact on systemic inflammation is still being studied, but the existing evidence is not reassuring, particularly for seniors whose gut microbiome diversity is already under pressure from age alone. This is a food that offers the appearance of dairy nutrition, calcium, and protein on the label, while delivering a chemical environment that works against the absorption and cardiovascular benefit that real aged cheese provides. This one surprises people because it starts as real cheese. The issue is what gets added to it. To prevent clumping during the weeks between production, packaging, and purchase, manufacturers coat pre-shredded cheese in anti-caking agents. The most common are cellulose, an indigestible plant fiber, and in many products, natamycin. Let me be accurate about both of these. Cellulose is used in very small amounts and is not harmful at these levels, but because it coats the cheese particles, it can reduce digestive enzyme access to the fat matrix inside, which matters when you're relying on that fat matrix to carry fat-soluble vitamins like A, D, and K2 into your system. For seniors who are already at elevated risk of deficiency in these exact vitamins, any consistent reduction in their absorption is worth taking seriously. Natamycin is an antifungal agent used in small, regulated quantities to prevent mold growth on food surfaces. At the amounts used in pre-shredded cheese, it is not acutely toxic. However, it is an active antifungal compound, and regular dietary exposure, even at low doses, has raised questions among researchers about potential effects on the gut fungal microbiome over time. This is an area of ongoing study, and I think it's fair to say the research isn't settled. But when a simple alternative exists, buying block cheese and shredding it yourself, it seems worth choosing the option with fewer unknowns. There's also an oxidation issue. The dramatically increased surface area from shredding accelerates the breakdown of fat-soluble nutrients. By the time pre-shredded cheese reaches your kitchen, its K2 and beneficial fatty acid content is meaningfully lower than equivalent block cheese stored under the same conditions. Buy block, shred it immediately before use. 5 minutes of effort, real difference. If a cheese product sits comfortably on a pantry shelf at room temperature, read the ingredient list before you open it. What makes these products shelf-stable is also what makes them metabolically problematic. Achieving that stability typically requires partially hydrogenated or intrasterified vegetable oils, industrial fats that have been so definitively linked to cardiovascular disease risk that partially hydrogenated oils have been banned or severely restricted in many countries. Even intrasterified fat replacements show early evidence of negatively affecting insulin sensitivity and lipid profiles. The sodium load is extraordinary. A single 2-tablespoon serving can carry between 400 and 600 milligrams, largely from phosphate-based industrial emulsifying salts, the same ones associated with vascular calcification and elevated levels of fibroblast growth factor 23, a hormone linked to cardiovascular mortality in adults with even mild kidney function reduction. Many of these spreads also contain glutamate compounds, listed under terms like natural flavoring, autolyzed yeast extract, or hydrolyzed protein, all permitted without explicit disclosure under current labeling regulations. This category of product offers no nutritional value that cannot be obtained more safely from real aged cheese, while simultaneously delivering industrial fats, excess phosphate sodium, and ingredients with meaningful health implications. And with that, we arrive at the most important cheese on this entire list, the one that surprises people most, the one that looks like a health-conscious choice. Hold on. I want you to pay close attention here, because this is the cheese that health-conscious seniors often choose deliberately. It feels artisanal, it feels like a step above processed food, and that perception, that cultural cachet, is exactly why it deserves the most careful discussion on this list. Blue cheese gets its distinctive appearance and intensely sharp flavor from live mold cultures, specifically Penicillium roqueforti and related strains. For most people in occasional servings, this is not acutely dangerous, but for seniors, there is a specific biochemical consideration that is seriously underappreciated. Blue cheese contains very high concentrations of tyramine, a biogenic amine that accumulates during extended protein breakdown in the aging process. In a younger, healthy adult, tyramine is rapidly broken down by monoamine oxidase enzymes in the gut and liver. But here's where this becomes clinically urgent. A meaningful number of adults over 60 are taking medications that directly inhibit those very enzymes. Monoamine oxidase inhibitors, prescribed for depression, Parkinson's disease, and certain anxiety conditions. For those individuals, consuming even a moderate portion of blue cheese can trigger what's called a hypertensive crisis, a rapid, dangerous spike in blood pressure that can increase the risk of stroke or cardiac event. This is not a theoretical concern. It is a documented, well-established drug-food interaction. If you are on any of these medications, blue cheese is something your prescribing physician should be explicitly advising you to avoid. If that conversation hasn't happened, have it. Even for seniors not on those medications, the combination of age-related decline in diamine oxidase, the primary enzyme responsible for breaking down tyramine, and the very high tyramine load in blue cheese can produce elevated cardiovascular reactivity, migraine frequency, flushing, and palpitations that many seniors are currently attributing simply to getting older. It may not be just getting older. And here's the connection back to Gruyère that I promised earlier. One of the things that distinguishes authentic Gruyère is its amino acid profile, specifically its elevated cysteine and glycine content. These amino acids are direct precursors to glutathione, your body's primary internal antioxidant. Glutathione production declines significantly after 60, contributing directly to the accelerating oxidative stress and immune deterioration that underlies so much chronic disease in seniors. Supporting glutathione synthesis through dietary precursors, as Gruyère does, is a genuinely meaningful strategy for slowing that process. Blue cheese contributes to the oxidative and inflammatory burden. Gruyère actively supports the body's defenses against it. They are not in the same category. They are not even in the same conversation. Before I give you my final thoughts, if anything you've heard in the last 8 minutes has genuinely shifted how you think about what's in your refrigerator, I want to ask something of you. Share this video with someone over 60 who deserves to know this. A parent, a sibling, a friend who is doing everything right and still struggling. The gap between what clinical research shows and what most people actually know is enormous, and it doesn't have to be. And if you haven't subscribed to the Eternal Vigor Way yet, please do it now. This channel exists for one reason: to give you the evidence, the clarity, and the practical guidance to age with intention, on your own terms. New content every week, real science, no shortcuts. Hit subscribe and the bell so you never miss one. Now, here's what I want you to leave with. Here is the takeaway. Cheese is not your enemy. The right cheese, chosen with some knowledge, is one of the most nutrient-dense, bioavailable, and practically useful whole foods available to the aging body. Aged Gouda, authentic Parmigiano-Reggiano, raw grass-fed Cheddar, and authentic Swiss Gruyère all earn their place in a health-conscious senior's kitchen, not as indulgences, but as legitimate contributors to bone density, cardiovascular health, gut integrity, cognitive support, and muscle preservation. The wrong cheese, the processed slices, the pre-shredded bags, the shelf-stable spreads, and particularly blue cheese for anyone over 60 on certain common medications is not a neutral food choice. It is a recurring, compounding source of excess phosphate sodium, gut microbiome disruption, industrial fats, and in specific drug interaction scenarios, a genuine cardiovascular risk. The research is clear. The mechanisms are understood. What has been missing is someone willing to put this in plain language and bring it directly to the people who need it most. That is why I'm here. That is what this channel is for. I'm Dr. Ava Collins. Aging well isn't about restriction, it's about precision, and now you have a little more of it. Leave a comment below. Which of these cheeses surprised you most? And have you, or has someone you know, noticed a difference after changing what's in the dairy drawer? I read every comment and I respond to as many as I can. If this gave you something useful, please like the video, share it with someone who needs it, and I will see you in the next one on the Eternal Vigor Way.